The marble floors of Vieira Industries gleamed so brightly they almost reflected the storm brewing in the heart of its young CEO, Celine Vieira. At just 32, she was hailed as one of the most brilliant business minds in America, a woman who had turned her late father's crumbling empire into a global powerhouse. But behind her crisp suits, perfect posture, and cold grey eyes was a secret that only her sleepless nights knew. Her company was slowly bleeding from within. Despite the headlines that praised her genius, Vieira Industries was weeks away from collapse. That morning, Celine stood in her glass-walled office overlooking downtown Chicago, sunlight pouring in over stacks of reports that told the same story: falling profits, angry investors, and a future that looked like dust. Her CFO had quit the previous day, her board was restless, and the media had started whispering about a crack in the Queen's crown. She had spent the entire night in the office, drinking bitter coffee and trying to make sense of numbers that refused to bend in her favor. When dawn came, she walked out to clear her head, her heels clicking against the marble as she passed through the nearly empty lobby. The janitor was mopping the far side, humming a tune that echoed faintly across the vast hall. He was an older man, with streaks of silver in his hair, a worn face, and a kind of quiet patience in his eyes that seemed out of place in a building filled with ambition and ego. His name tag read Henry Caldwell. She had seen him before, always early, always cleaning, always quiet. Maybe it was the exhaustion or the frustration, but as she stopped near him, something in her snapped into irony. "Tell me, Henry," she said, her voice dry with fatigue and sarcasm. "You've been around here for what, 20 years? Got any financial advice for your CEO?" She meant it as a joke, a tired woman's way of mocking the absurdity of her own situation. But Henry didn't laugh. He looked up, his kind eyes steady and unafraid, and said softly, "Yes, ma'am. Stop treating money like it's the only thing that can save you." Celine froze. He went back to mopping as if he hadn't just said something that sliced through every layer of her composure. "If you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories that remind us what really matters, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Journal. Let's keep spreading light, one true-hearted story at a time." Celine stood there, watching him for a moment longer, before turning on her heel and walking away, pretending she wasn't shaken. But Henry's words followed her all day, echoing in every boardroom, every email, every empty sigh. "Stop treating money like it's the only thing that can save you." What did that even mean? That evening, after the office had emptied again, she found herself walking back down to the lobby. Henry was there, still mopping, still humming softly to himself. Without really planning to, she spoke. "What did you mean earlier?" she asked. He looked up, surprised to see her back. "I meant what I said," he replied. "Sometimes people with the most money are the ones most afraid of losing something they can't buy back." She frowned. "Like what?" He smiled faintly. "Peace, purpose, people." Over the next few days, their strange conversations continued. Celine would come down late at night or early in the morning, and Henry would be there, always working, always with something quiet and true to say. He told her about growing up in a small town in Indiana, how he once owned a tiny grocery store that went under when a big chain moved in, how he lost his wife to cancer 10 years ago, and how cleaning buildings helped him keep moving so grief didn't settle too deep. Celine found herself telling him things she'd never said out loud, that she missed her father, that she didn't know if she even wanted to run the company anymore, that she felt like she was drowning in expectations. Henry never interrupted, never gave shallow comfort. He just listened, then said something that always landed like quiet truth. One morning, as sunlight spilled through the lobby windows, Celine found Henry sitting on a bench, rubbing his shoulder tiredly. She sat beside him, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You know," she said softly, "for someone who mops floors, you give better business advice than most of the consultants I pay millions for." He chuckled. That's because I don't see business as numbers. I see it as people. That day, something inside Celine shifted. She began visiting departments she hadn't stepped into in years. The warehouse, the design lab, the shipping bay. She started asking real questions, listening to her employees' frustrations and ideas. She realized that somewhere along the way, Vieira Industries had stopped feeling like a family and turned into a machine. It wasn't easy to fix. The board resisted. Her investors doubted her new human-centered approach. But slowly, she started changing things, launching small programs to help struggling staff, funding innovation labs led by junior employees, setting up mentoring sessions. Henry's wisdom had unlocked something she'd forgotten, her father's original dream for the company: build people, and they'll build the business. Weeks turned into months. The company's culture began to heal, and with it the numbers too. Employees worked harder, stayed longer, cared more. And in every quiet success, Celine could trace Henry's words lingering behind it. But life, as it often does, shifted again. One morning when Celine came down to the lobby, Henry wasn't there. She asked around and learned he'd collapsed during his shift the night before and had been taken to a small public hospital on the south side of the city. Without a second thought, Celine cancelled her meetings and drove there. When she found him, Henry was lying in a simple hospital bed, hooked to an 4, smiling weakly. "You shouldn't be here, Miss Vieira," he murmured. "You've got a company to run." She shook her head, tears rising. "You've done more for my company than anyone else ever has." Henry chuckled softly, his eyes distant but warm. "You did that yourself. You just needed to remember why you started." He told her he had no family left, no savings beyond his modest paycheck. Celine sat beside him until he fell asleep, and as she watched the frail man who had changed her life, she realized something deeper than gratitude. She owed him more than thanks. She owed him the dignity he had given her, the chance to feel human again. Over the next few weeks, she made sure Henry had the best care, paid his bills quietly, and visited him every few days. She even brought him a framed photo of the lobby he'd cleaned for 20 years. "You made this place shine," she said one afternoon. "Now it's our turn to shine it for you." Henry smiled, his eyes glistening. "Promise me one thing, Miss Vieira. Keep leading with heart. The world has enough smart people. It needs kind ones." That was the last conversation they had. Henry passed away peacefully 2 days later, and for the first time in years, Celine cried like a child. At his funeral, only a handful of people attended, a few co-workers, a nurse, and Celine herself. But she stood there with flowers in her hands and tears on her cheeks, silently promising him that his words would never be forgotten. A few months later, Vieira Industries unveiled something new: the Henry Caldwell Foundation, a program offering education, healthcare, and financial support for underprivileged workers and their families. Celine stood on stage before hundreds of employees as sunlight filtered through the tall glass windows. The same light that once fell across Henry's mop and bucket. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "This company was built on the belief that no one is too small to make a difference. Henry reminded me that wisdom doesn't wear a title. It lives in kindness, humility, and courage. This foundation is for him and for every person who believes that compassion is the most powerful form of leadership." The applause that followed wasn't just for her. It was for the janitor who had changed everything. After the ceremony, Celine walked through the lobby one last time before heading to her office. The floors gleamed, just like they always had, but this time she didn't just see reflections of power and success. She saw Henry's quiet smile, his patience, and the echo of his gentle voice. "Stop treating money like it's the only thing that can save you." She smiled softly. "You were right, Henry, it never was." As she turned to leave, a ray of daylight fell across the polished marble, warm and golden, and for a brief moment it almost felt like he was still there, watching.